listening to Moments Podcast with me, Shuang Cai. In this show, I am going to talk to artists, academics, industry practitioners, and entrepreneurs from a variety of backgrounds, each of whom is committed to imagining a better tomorrow and working to make it a reality. Some of their experiences are experimental, some are highly practical and ambitious. Most importantly, each dialogue is imaginative, because we want to engage in dialogue with people from all over the world who are curious about life, to enjoy a moment together, to seize the moment, to seize eternity. Join me and these amazing people and their experience life as it's meant to be lived. Hello everyone, welcome to Moments Podcast. Today's guest is Dr. Gareth White. We had a brief online video chat several years ago and met him in person last month at the TEPRA conference. It's a great honor for me to record this podcast episode with Gareth in London, sharing his experiences in the theatre industry, academic research, and teaching experience. Welcome, Gareth White.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Gareth White. I teach at Central School of Speech and Drama, where I've been working for quite a while now. I teach on the undergraduate applied theatre course, as well as across the PhD programme and some of the MA programmes. And my research is about audience participation and other things connected with that, such as immersive theatre.
Because we met last month during a TEPRA conference, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of could start our dialogue or conversation a little bit about that conference. Do you still remember, or do you come across any fascinating or memorable experience or sharing of the scholars or the those practitioners?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a highlight for me was the keynote given by Adam Alston. Now, Adam had won the David Bradby Prize the year before for his book Staging Decadence. And as is traditional, the winner of the David Bradby Prize gives the keynote at the conference the following year. So this year, Adam presented some work connected to his project of Staging Decadence.
You mean the live performance, right?
Well, it was a mixture of performance and lecture, wasn't it?
Yes, exactly.
And this is very appropriate to Adam's project, as well as writing his monograph, Staging Decadence. There were a whole series of events connected with it. And they often were styled as salons. So he would discuss research, he would invite other people to discuss their research or their insights, their knowledge about the idea of decadence or the idea of decadence in performance, histories of how decadent art forms had existed in different points in history, but also how the idea of decadence had been used, sometimes weaponized, sometimes become part of structures of oppression. Anyway, he certainly talked about some of that on the Tuesday night of the TEPRA conference. But he also invited some performers, including, for example, someone I got to meet later and was introduced to as Sasha, but performs under the name of Hazard Lasin. And Hazard Lasin, in this case, was doing a piece where they appeared as a succubus, I think, or an incubus, a demon that comes to you in the night and seduces you and perhaps steals your soul.
The very last piece, right?
I think so, yeah. Hazard Lasin appeared with some demonic horns and draped in loose-fitting, chiffony clothes that they then took off while parading around the foyer of the arts building in Warwick University in broad daylight. And yeah, as they said later in a chat at the pub, this is work that normally takes place at 2 o'clock in the morning in dark, sweaty environments, not in broad day with a bunch of academics stroking their chins. Yeah. So it was a slightly interesting juxtaposition of form and content.
Right?
Yeah, well, it's approached that, yeah.
Right.
I mean, he was definitely wandering amongst the audience.
And I am one of the
I think they wanted more. Oh, were you? Did you have to pull a piece of clothing off?
And my face was like, oh my goodness. I'm very old school, you know.
Well, anyway. I hope that they crossed some boundaries there. Actually, there was another performance that was more participatory, wasn't there? Now I'm trying to remember the name of the performer because this had come to me. No, just in the same session.
Oh,
Adam's keynote, the prosthetic body that people were sewing.
The first one.
Yeah, no, we will remember the name.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where I got involved. This performer came out into the crowd and invited people to embroider their body.
Yes.
But the body, of course, was a kind of silicone prosthetic over the top of their body. And that was quite a strange experience because sewing into this, stitching into this material and pulling and yanking and trying to get the needle through really felt much the same as stitching into somebody's.
For me, it's more like a performing arts.
Yeah, absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's certainly crossing the boundary into performance art or live art rather than strictly in the territory of theatre. But, we know that those boundaries are very porous these days.
Exactly.
Let's go back and forth.
We have already mentioned about the word participatory theatre, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the stuff that you have been doing for years. And actually, you have founded your own theatre company, a theatre in education company producing performers for like schools, hospitals or other non-theatre venues, like a lot of practitioners are doing nowadays. But later on, how did you transition from being a theatre practitioner to academic researcher?
Yeah, okay. That's quite a long way back now. I think this is around 1997, 98 when I was making that transition. And I'm not sure I knew I was making a transition at that point. I was a kind of jobbing actor and practitioner working with theatre companies around London, often touring to schools, leading workshops as well as being in performances. That was satisfying to an extent, but it wasn't scratching some itches that I had around research, what I now think of as research, but at that time just, examining things more closely and thinking deeply about things. So that's when I took on a part-time PhD at Goldsmiths. And I didn't know at that point that was going to turn me into a full-time academic. I thought that might just be a way of enlivening my practice and something that I do alongside being a professional practitioner. But gradually, as the PhD went along, I was picking up more and more bits of part-time university teaching until and eventually got a job at Central.
Was that a golden age, I would say, for theatre practitioners when you were doing theatre in education company?
No, I wouldn't say it was a golden age. I would say if there was a golden age, it would have been in the 60s and the 70s in the UK.
Oh, so it's that's of the starting point.
Yeah, that's the time when the idea of theatre in education, TIE, was born explicitly, though people had been making theatre for children for a long time and had been using theatre in education context for a long time. But that's the time when companies like the Belgrade Theatre in companies that worked solely with children and developed practice that was solely for children in an education context. So they were
And later on,
that expanded very quickly across the UK and then in other forms in other countries, but branched out from that idea. And then a lot of that was quite politically oriented and motivated. So by the time we had a change of government in the 1980s, and the beginning of what we'd now call a culture war, the environment of the creative industries and the environment in education certainly wasn't so conducive to progressive education, child-centred education, and all the ideas that had underpinned theatre and education and drama education more broadly. When Blair comes back in the late 90s, then there is an expansion of government spending on the arts and on education. It doesn't switch back to the kind of structures that existed in the 60s and 70s, where local authorities were very open and able to spend according to their own initiative and prioritise exactly what they wanted. There were still things like the national curriculum in the UK, which is very centrally governed, and still a move away from local education authorities being able to structure things as they wanted. So even under Blair, there was more money available, but it didn't create the environment that there had been in the 60s and the 70s, where
how do you judge the environment nowadays?
It's very, very tough. In some ways, things have improved because, let me see. Some ways things have improved decade by decade, simply because more people have seen the evidence. More people in positions of influence below government have seen the evidence that the arts work, and they therefore will support it. And sometimes that's in charities, sometimes that's in senior management in schools. And this is not just in the UK, this is all over the world. It's been proved that the arts make a great difference to young people's lives and to people's lives generally. And that we can teach all sorts of things through the arts. We can complement teaching in all sorts of areas. We can change people's lives in all sorts of ways through the arts. But right now we've been through in the UK 14 years of government that didn't, despite all the evidence, didn't value these things. And if it valued any form of the arts, it was conservative arts forms with a small c. Now we have a government who don't seem to have either the bandwidth or the time or the willingness to make the money to expand things. So we're dependent on those corners and areas of arts funding where there are still enlightened people available to, able to direct resources.
What kind of turning points made you to focus on or specialize on in the field of audience participation or participatory theatre?
Okay. You mentioned Armadillo Theatre earlier. Now that's a company that started with 3 colleagues when I was a university student. David, Nina and Tim. 4 of us together, and then some other people joined us or did some work with us. But we did lots of workshops in school. We did lots of participatory performances that were loosely based on Boal's Forum Theatre. While we were doing that, I thought there was something interesting underpinning the audience participation that we were doing there. That this wasn't just that the combination of a performance and drawing participation into it, and this particular moment where you're drawing people out of their seats, you're changing the nature of that event.
And you really see the impact of the audience, for the audience, right?
Well, yes, you see You see young people having a good time.
Right away.
Yeah, right away. Demonstrating impact is an extremely fraught business, if you're talking about long-term impact. But you see people enjoying themselves, and you see people using theatre as a venue for debate in those particular kind of practices. You see things happening between people, and that's exciting. But I always thought, as well as being kind of exciting and evidently an educational tool, I wanted to look into how it was part of an art form in itself. And this is the thing I call an aesthetics of participation, that the practices of making people involved, they're part of our art form. They're not an add-on. They're not something extra to the practice of being a theatre maker. So I had a very vague idea of that when I started my PhD, and then of course that became quite focused as the work went on, to try to understand in a really broad way what's happening at that moment where you change from one role to another, from the role of an audience or an audience member or a spectator or whatever, to the role of an audience participant, which is to say, to the role of a performer.
Is that your first book, Audience Participation in Theatre, Aesthetics of Invitation, right?
That's right.
2013.
Yeah.
You introduced, actually I finished that book, I think in the beginning of this year when I was writing some material of my upper grade, I would say. You introduced the concept of invitation, right? So how do you, or what kind of elements do you believe that constitute a successful invitation during a performance or during a participatory theatre?
I mean, I don't know if I think about it in those terms. A successful invitation means that this transformation happens. People move from one role to another. And that can happen in all sorts of ways, because that's a social process within an artistic frame. We can do it in all sorts of ways and draw on just about all of the aspects of ourselves as social beings, and all our cultural knowledges as socially situated subjects. We can pressure people, we can bully people, we can seduce people, we can trick people,
Horrify
we
people.
can very transparently invite people with a full ethical application to our practice. And that's what makes it interesting and fertile to me as an area to research, and as something that I think will always, as long as we've got something that's recognisably theatre, then there'll be new ways that people will do this work of inviting.
But the interesting thing about the invitation is, well, sometimes invitation do succeed, right? But sometimes the invitation failed.
Yeah.
So in your mind, why do some invitations succeed while for the rest of them failed or made people or the audience awkward?
Yeah.
Or resistant sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are the reasons that people will resist or refuse, or actually may participate while being uncomfortable. Yeah, those are manifold.
Right.
They're ultimately they're down to the individual and the context. But yes, how can we frame those? Well, has there been a proper match, a sympathetic match between the nature of the invitation and the audience members' horizon of participation? That's the other term that I brought in to try and think this through. There's an idea in reception studies of the horizon of expectation. When we open a book, we have a certain idea of what kind of book it's going to be, and we approach it on those terms. Or when we watch a film, we watch it as an action full movie or a love story or whatever, and therefore we know what we're going to do with it.
Yeah.
And in theatre, we do the same with genres, but we also do the same with our expectations of our role as audience members. So, are we going to sit quietly?
Yeah,
and are we going to applaud politely? Are we all going to look in the same direction? Part of the point of studying audiences is to unpack and to make transparent the codes that exist in terms of how we behave as audiences and how we play a part in the event as audiences.
Especially when audience pay for it, right?
Yeah, well, that's part of the whole participation, isn't it? Yeah. We participate in a lot of cases. Our first bit of participation is paying for a ticket. To make a decisive intervention, we pay for a ticket and then we show up and so forth. And all of this is really obvious, but sometimes you need to step back and state the obvious. And I think a lot of that book, Audience Participation in Theatre, is stating the obvious. I think a lot of it is just kind of mapping out some really straightforward things about audience participation. But I was quite lucky, I suppose, in that I didn't think anybody else had set out that obvious stuff at that point. And yeah, that's why people paid attention to that book a little bit at that time.
I think participatory theatre has been, developing for a long time, and nowadays immersive theatre seems really popular in the industry. Do you think there's any gap or there's any big differences between two, or are they quite the same stuff?
Depends from what perspective you're looking at it. I think immersive theatre exists as a genre these days. I think it exists as certainly a marketing term, but also a term that practitioners use together to identify what their work is, to identify themselves as a community. There are networks of immersive practitioners, and they more or less know what they're talking about. And I don't spend a lot of time in my research analysing that, but I think there's potential to analyse just what do the practitioners mean when they get together in these networks? What do they mean when they advertise their work as immersive? Because they'll all mean slightly different things, and sometimes they argue about it. But there's a general consensus, certainly in some areas, about what immersive means, immersive theatre. And we, therefore, as audience members separately, we can identify the work that we want to see. And there are people who are fans of immersive theatre.
Exactly.
And there are communities of fans of immersive theatre. Yeah? So
and I think nowadays immersive theatre is much more expensive than other genres of theatre.
Do you think?
Forms. Don't you think so?
I mean, it can be expensive, but so can the West End or Broadway or whatever the equivalent is in Shanghai. I don't know.
True. I mean, Sleep No More, right? I don't know how much it costs here, but in Shanghai, normally costs us £70 to £80.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that the same here?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if some people pay £70 to £80 for one of the Punch Drunk shows. Sleep No More hasn't been on here for a very long time. The version of that was in London was more than 20 years ago. But the last Punch Drunk show may well have had tickets in that ballpark, certainly £50-60.
Right, but compared to other theatre shows, it's definitely more expensive, right?
Not compared to the West End.
Okay.
If you're paying to go to sit anywhere with a decent view, you can certainly pay 50, 60, 70, £100 in the West
And
End.
it depends which area you sit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that doesn't, well, actually, immersive companies have their version of that, including Punch Drunk, that you can pay more for a seat, not a seat, but for a ticket with special privileges.
Yes.
And, let's be generous to those practitioners, keeping a company running, is
Making money.
well, it's paying the bills, certainly. It's not, nobody's getting massively rich about this. And work that is immersive, speaking very broadly without, having pinned down what we mean by that, but we usually mean something where an audience member is getting a very individual experience, in the sense that they have space to wander, or they have a particular encounter. It's not the most cost-effective kind of theatre. We don't get to squeeze as many people as possible into a big building and make them all sit looking in the same direction. The theatre, as we understand it, was developed as a cost-effective business in the West, in Europe and North America, from the 18th through to the 20th centuries. And immersive theatre is one movement alongside lots of others that unpacks that and does that, and says, well, theatre could be lots of other things than sitting in the dark and looking at a stage.
Audience role playing as well, right?
All sorts of things, all sorts of ways that we can do it differently. That's expensive.
Do you think, immersive theatre is more like a promotional slogan or a symbol for the audience, for the customers, being sold as a commodity?
It certainly is being sold as a commodity. And we might want other aspects of the art form to be more important than its commoditization, but it exists in a capitalist system, and the usual way that we get to deliver our art in a capitalist system is by selling it.
And you have already mentioned about the fans economy, right? That's really a huge part of, also for the musical theatre as well today. Crazy. Some of the audience in Shanghai, they would pay for £80 to watch Sleep No over and over again, like more than 10 times. I was like, okay.
Now, I think there's something very interesting in that from a commercial perspective, and looking at these performances as commoditized experiences. That people go to musicals, conventional musicals, many times. Sometimes just to exactly the same musical,
like the Les Miserables.
But sometimes people will go because there are different casts.
Oh yes.
So they're trying to make sure that they see all variations. With immersive theatre, where you are, especially the free roaming versions, where you are moving according to your own decisions, your own choices. You're making choices. You're finding things. You're hearing about other people and the experience that they've had. There are many, many more varieties of experience for you to want to go back for. So in that, it's potentially fabulous marketing. Now, when somebody taught me marketing a very long time ago, they said that marketing isn't just about advertising and the stories that you tell your potential customers. Marketing is about the product you're offering in the first place. So there's something brilliant about the combination of the art form and how it appeals to an audience, and how it can encourage an audience to come back and buy the experience again and again, if the experience is always going to be different. And you might be looking for all of those different varieties of experience when you come back again. There's a great fun piece, actually it's not a single piece, but there's an experience that's happening in London that's called Bridge Command, that I'm very interested in, which is it casts you as an audience participant, it casts you as a member of the crew of a spaceship. And it's made by a company called Parabolic. And they've made, underneath some railway arches in Vauxhall in London, they've made the interior of 2 spaceships to a really high production specification. So that you could film a TV series on the inside of this. The detail is that good. And you sign up to go on a mission. And it's great fun. And of course, then there are, at any one time, there are 4 missions running, but they're now on their 3rd set of those missions. So people who really like it, the fan community, get to go back and say, all right, I've done all of those 8. Now there's a new set. I'm going to get my friends together and we're going to go on another. And it certainly sits right at the commercial end of what immersive theatre is. And it overlaps with other things in the experience economy. It's not, in some ways it's like going to an escape room. In some ways it's like a live action role play. It's technically brilliant, dramaturgically interesting, and I think the missions actually are getting more interesting. They're experimenting more with what they can do with the kinds of stories that they can tell. But again, it's well set up for those customers, for those people who want their cultural life to be like that. It gives them the chance to go back again and again. But like you said, you were talking about the cost of Sleep No More in Shanghai. This isn't cheap. People who are going back again and again are spending a lot of money.
There are loads of participation part within the whole process of the performance, right? Have the team or the actors ever worried about that losing control over the work by inviting audience participation in such, segments?
I'm sure that every performer who works in that way has that worry at the back of their minds.
And how do they handle that?
Well, okay. There's 2 different things. You can prepare for it.
Right.
So that...
Doing loads of improvisation,
Doing
right?
loads and loads of improvisation, trying it out, play testing, having your colleagues pretend to be audience members and doing it again and again and again until you think you've covered every possible eventuality. I mean, to some extent, you've got to do that. You've got to play with that moment of invitation, as I call it. But, the moment of interaction where you're offering things to an audience member or a group of audience members and seeing what they do with that. I would imagine that the best performers, the best companies and ensembles that do this are the ones who are still open to the interesting new offers.
The uncertain part.
Yeah, absolutely. You're creating something unpredictable, so you need to welcome that unpredictability. If all you're going to do is expect a very limited number of outcomes to your offer, number of responses, then you're not really making the most of that unpredictability. Being able to handle somebody who's just saying no and incorporate that so that the event, that hasn't spoiled the moment or the event. There's space for people to say, I'd rather not. Or for you to be able to have options at your fingertips to convert that into a, oh yes, go on then, kind of attitude. All of that's the fun of it.
Yeah.
That's what makes it interesting for performers, and that's where I think the most. That's what will pull performers into doing this work, is that they enjoy that unpredictability.
Yeah,
And it'll put others off entirely because they want to be able to craft a performance that is more or less the same every night.
And I suppose if they experience more kinds of diverse audience, the more mature that they will perform on the stage or on the venue. I'm curious about how do you teach the participatory theatre theories for your students to let them know or have a deeper understanding of what kind of immersive theatre really is or participatory theatre really is.
How do I teach it?
Yeah.
Well,
do you teach them, skills, improvisation, practice, or what kind of ways that you will use?
I do teach it as theory.
Yeah.
Quite often, I will run an option module that I'll call Aesthetics of Participation, and we'll talk about, we'll unpack theories of audience. We'll talk about students' own expectations and understanding of what they ought to do, what's expected of them, and we'll talk endlessly about our own experiences. And I'll introduce, theory from within its context. So I'll talk about reception theory, and I'll go back into that's the origin of that in literary studies. I'll talk about social theories, for example, Pierre Bourdieu's theories. I'll talk about some more challenging stuff from critical theory, perhaps Theodore Adorno, and how the sense of what an artwork is, how an artwork can have its own being, if you like, can complicate our understanding of what a participatory artwork is. When something is emerging in the moment, how do we understand it? So, yeah, as far as possible, I will always ask those students to go to watch and experience and participate in stuff themselves. And some will be making their own. There's different projects. They'll be making their own invitational, participatory, immersive work. But then, yeah,
do you wish to, train them as actors or directors or dramaturg?
Okay.
Or
the context that I teach in at Central School of Speech and Drama. Now, Central is very famous for teaching actors, but that's only a fraction of what we do there. I teach on the undergraduate applied theatre degree, where students are learning about participatory theatre in a broader sense. They're learning about participation in the sense of applied arts, applied theatre. So where
how to facilitate, right?
How to facilitate, exactly. Yeah, we're training people to become facilitators and workshop leaders, educators, people to use the participation in theatre and performance to change lives. So the students I'm teaching very often are already very open to ideas of participation and to models of theatre that aren't the commercial model that we were just talking about. So if they're thinking about making use of participatory practices in the sense that audience participatory practices that I'm talking about, they're often thinking about it in very different contexts. They're thinking about how to do that work with children, or as we started out, our conversation, we started talking about practice I've done in the past. Or with older people, or people with disabilities, people from different communities. Yeah. So how audience participation becomes part of a whole combination of practices that are about making performance that's a lively, creative encounter within a community as well as across communities.
They prefer participatory theatre or immersive theatre more, or the traditional way of performing on stage more?
Oh, there are as many students who hate the idea as love it, just like there are in general audiences. I think it is the kind of thing that can be very exciting for students, for people who are coming to a university setting and they want to expand their horizons. They want to broaden their framework and their understanding of what's possible with their art form. So audience participation, because it turns theatre upside down, even now when it's very popular, even now when immersive theatre's been around for 25 years or whatever, it's still opening up new horizons for people. It's still, opening new opportunities, and students find that exciting, and some of them carry that excitement through into their professional lives.
Nice. So do you think, or have you ever observed that this kind of specific genre of theatre provides more opportunities for, application of the theatre for students? Do you see what I mean? Because not everyone can be chosen to perform on the West End or, for those fancy shows.
Yeah.
But participatory theatre probably gives them another stage to do what they really love to.
Yeah, the graduates from the courses I teach are moving out into all sorts of different roles. They're not looking at getting onto the stages, most of them. They're not looking at getting onto television or getting onto the West End stage. They're looking at using it in experimental context and in social contexts. So yes, I've seen that a lot. And these practices give people expand the toolkit of what theatre can be.
So we have talked about the students, teaching experience. Let's move back to the audience a little bit. So in your observation, in your, rich experience, has the attitude of the new generation of theatre creators toward the audience changed significantly compared to the past? Or do they ultimately converge towards the same goal?
No, I think audiences' expectations and practitioners' expectations have changed a great deal. I think we don't need to do as much work to convert people. Don't need to tell people so much in advance. Practitioners also need to work harder if they want to surprise people, because audiences are quite familiar with the idea that they're going to be given things to do.
In other words, the performers or the people who are doing, creative work in theatre industry, they have to have more skills, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise,
certainly, if you're going to say, we're going to give you an amazing experience because we're going to ask you to participate, there's going to be a lot more audience members who go, yeah, I know how that works. What have you got for me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
they knew the word already, right?
Yeah.
Hard. Okay. Nice. And I don't know whether the next question is appropriate, but I still, would like to raise a question. There's loads of development of new technologies like VR, AR, and nowadays like DeepSeek, ChatGPT, all sorts of technologies. They bring entirely new possibilities for immersion or participation. How do you view technology's role in the future theatre industry? Yeah. Do you think
that's another big question?
Do you think it's ruining human connection between each other?
I think some aspects of the way we use and live with technology, yes, are changing in negative ways, how we spend time with each other and connect with each other.
Right.
But at the same time, it's opening up new things. I think, it's stating the obvious, but the pandemic demonstrated how technology can create connection and allow connection. And, it was an enforced period of experimentation for all of us in our social lives, but especially for artists who wanted to make things live.
Yeah.
And I think, we all learned about how it was possible to connect via screens and what the limits of that were. And I think, people did really interesting performances at that time.
Through screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Live performance.
Yeah, and I tried doing it with some of my students, and some of that was awful. Some of what we made was awful, but some of the experience of trying to direct an ensemble of students when everyone's sitting at home in their bedroom, and I'm sitting at home in my cellar where my office is, really not very conducive. But, we made something happen at a time when not much was happening. But who else made some interesting things? Coney, Tassos Stevens and Coney did a whole series of things, some of which were just about magic tricks, some of which were very explicitly kind of whodunit games, where you're trying to catch somebody, you're trying to solve a puzzle and those kinds of things. There's a company called Uninvited Guests converted one of their shows into an online version. And there was some, I think down to really tiny details about, what eye contact meant in that context. It became very interesting.
Right.
And when we reach out to people, when we try to connect with people through a screen, we're mostly not looking directly at the camera, we're looking at their eyes. I'm talking to you now and I'm looking at your eyes, and this is totally normal, and it's part of the work I do to try to communicate the ideas, along with this body language that nobody in the podcast can see. But when you're doing that on screen, your eyes are doing a different thing. If you look up at the camera, the tiny dot on the top of your laptop or wherever, and connect with that, you're not feeling the response of somebody's eye contact. And when you look at someone's eyes, they're seeing you look down at their chin or their nose.
Yes.
Of course, when we're on stage, we're not looking into the eyes of one other person, but we can look out into the blackness and know that we're connecting with a whole bunch of people. And we can look down at the first rows and we can find individuals. And when we're doing close-up, intimate work in participatory performance, we'll absolutely use eye contact and body language and proximity. And all of those things were transformed in technology, in using telematic communication. They were changed, but they weren't removed. Body language was still there.
Right.
It was frustratingly interfered with, but it was still there. And when it was all we had, it was still valuable. I've rambled on from your question because there's no yes or no answer to whether technology is going to be good or bad.
We have no idea about the future, no.
And the ideas we have are sometimes apocalyptic, when just being apocalyptic and dystopian about it is not really going to help us. We need to try to grasp the whole of the way the world is transforming, as well as try to focus on the details.
Even though humanities are declining, collapsing, but we do believe that there is still some value.
I was using artificial intelligence tools last week to help me do a literature search in relation to some new research I'm doing, and it definitely allowed me to find some sources much more quickly. And they weren't rubbish sources. AI hadn't made them up. There's refinements going on that mean that these tools are actually going to make some things more efficient.
And we save a
And-
lot of time.
But I'm also going back into another academic term, another academic year, wondering whether we have an adequate response to student writing that we suspect has been produced by artificial intelligence. I don't think we had an adequate response over the last academic year. And the questions for creative artists are just as pressing and conflicting. In terms of experimental practices, an awful lot has already been tried. The period of the periods of great experimentation over the 20th century and into the 21st. If you think you've got a great idea, somebody's probably done it. But that doesn't mean it shouldn't be done again in new context, because our context is always changing. Where we need new ideas is
It's really hard to find the research gap nowadays.
Yeah. I agree. I see that in trying to take my own research forward. It's not just for people at the PhD level finding the research gap. But as far as the practice itself goes, the challenge is finding the resources, finding the space in the world where people are going to allow you to do your work. And that's only going to that's going to continue to change. It could potentially get better, not just through governments making new decisions, but the whole nature and meaning of work could change. Artificial intelligence promises to make life easier, make things more efficient, remove the need for all sorts of work. If we have a fair distribution of that new wealth and a fair distribution of the work that needs doing afterwards, then there's space for a lot more people to become artists.
Yeah, let's still have some hope.
It's been harder and it will be harder again. So we have to go forward with hope.
Gareth, very nice to talk with you.
Nice to
and
talk to you
thanks
too.
for your effort and contribution.
Thank you for your invitation.
And thanks for listening. See you next time.
Bye-bye.